So the idea that they can't put age restriction on pornography has been a joke, and I deeply regret the fact that rich, responsible tech owners haven't done more to play their role.
My name's Ian Henderson, and I'm the founder of the Naked Truth Project. What happens when you bring 6 leading voices together to talk about pornography? In the P-Word Talks, I travel across the country to have honest, eye-opening conversations with experts including Dr. Paula Hall, Helen Taylor, Dr. Alex Bailey, Dr. Ellie Hansen, Lord James Bethell and Dame Rachel D'Souza. They come from different backgrounds: mental health, safeguarding, politics and public advocacy. And they don't always agree with each other or with us at Naked Truth on every point. But they do agree on this: porn is causing real harm, and it's time we talked about it. So I'm joined by Lord James Bethell. James, when people hear about someone's a lord, they kind of think things like Downton Abbey and things like that. But you have a very clear political role, and you're a member of the House of Lords. So tell us a little bit about that work then, what you do as a member of the House of Lords.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, people think of sort of posh castles and loads of under-butlers. But no, that hasn't been my experience in the House of Lords. The really good thing about the House of Lords is there are a lot of people who genuinely care about public service. And theoretically, you're there for the whole of your life, although I think they are going to try and chuck out the hereditary peers. But that does give you a license to think beyond the political cycle and to dig deeper into some of the bigger issues that we as a country face. And for me, the biggest one has been around health, and I can talk a bit about that. And because of my interest in health, that took me to being interested in mental health and really the causes of bad health, bad mental health. And those are legion, there are a great many of them. But this area of pornography that we're here to talk about, for me, is just one of the most fundamental and basic examples of where there's a phenomenon in our society that's having a massive external impact on people's lives, on our economy, on our social discourse. And no one's really talking about it. And I'm trying to take this subject to Parliament, to the House of Lords, and I think we're making some progress.
Yeah, now there's been recently a government published report on pornography, the Pornography Review. What was that document, and why do you feel that was as an important part of what you're trying to do as you work on this issue?
Sure. So the background to it was that we took the online safety bill through Parliament, and that was a real challenge to the regulators, to government and to the industry to say that what goes on in the real world in terms of our laws should also be applied in the digital world, and that the platforms that have tried to argue that they've got nothing to do with the content on their sites actually now need to take responsibility for that content and its effect on people's lives. So I applaud the Online Safety Act and the work that it was done. It could have gone further. I would have liked to have had more, but really it's a world-beating piece of legislation. But there was one gap in it that was really clear. We kept pointing out to the government that there's examples of videos and materials online that are clearly illegal. There are men and women being raped. There are people having grievous bodily harm conducted to them. There's incredible misogyny and racist bias that would never be publishable in the real world. And yet, despite the clear evidence of the perpetrator, the distributor, the publisher, no one's doing anything about it. But when we came to saying, well, you know, the law, it needs to be changed to tackle this, they said not unreasonably, but hold on a second, murder is already illegal, rape is illegal, grievous bodily harm is illegal. If it's not being prosecuted, that's really a problem for the police, for the prosecution services, for the Ministry of Justice, for the policymakers at the top of the government. And so we need to address those things, not layer more and more law on top of law, which I have to say is a fair argument. So the purpose of this review, the Gabby Burton review, done extremely well by Gabby Burton, is to try to figure out what should we be doing as a government to plug those gaps? How do we tackle things that were already illegal and make sure that they are properly prosecuted, closed down, loopholes are filled, the right services feel motivated and empowered to tackle them. And that's why I think it's a really important review.
And so there was this review and then also a number of recommendations, I think 32.
Yes.
Which ones, obviously there's 32, so there's a lot of really important things being talked about, but which ones for you stand out as perhaps being most urgent, for example?
Well, if I was going to pick one, it's consent. Mm-hmm. This question of consent is absolutely fundamental. If you're going to be featured in a adult movie, it is absolutely fundamental that we know who you are, that you gave consent for this to happen. And by the way, it's a very, very delicate thing to happen. That when you gave consent, it was reasonably given and wasn't coerced. And that happens in other walks of life. And also, if you change your mind, that you can pull that consent. And that's a debatable point, because obviously, if I sell my image to you and you give me 10 quid for it, but I change my mind later, typically, I can't change my mind. That's a transaction and it's been done. But here in the area of adult content, I think the circumstances are different. So that is by far the most important. And if we can nail the question of consent, it will re-tilt in some ways the balance of power within the adult industry. And I think it'll mean that the nature of these films is going to change, because, goodness, I can't believe that many people give consent to a lot of what's going on in these films.
So the review was published in February 2025. And at the time, I think, obviously there was a lot of media around that and response to that. And I think one of the most common pushbacks really was that lots saying this is good and this was positive, but some saying that legislation shouldn't interfere with individuals' lives and their private lives and what goes on in the bedroom or whatever. How would you respond to that as somebody who is trying to bring some legislation and kind of advocating for something? How do you respond to that kind of pushback?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a Conservative former minister in the government. For me, privacy is absolutely sacrosanct, and we should definitely be protecting what happens in the bedroom. And by the way, celebrating it. And in all of its strange and peculiar expressions. I spent 10 years at the Ministry of Sound. I am someone who absolutely champions the fun things in life, and having a really great sex life and being open and excited about the way in which you go about your bedroom arrangements. I mean, I'm all in on that. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a violence escalator that takes people very, very quickly from perfectly legitimate, legal, smutty movies of the kind that I would defend all the way, very quickly to extremely nasty, violent, addictive, and all-consuming journey to increasingly dangerous content. And that content follows a track from hitting to abuse, strangulation, rape, and beyond. And the people who are involved in making those films are often victims of modern slavery, of coercion, of rape. And the people who watch it become victims because they themselves are drawn into this extremely messy world, and it has a terrible impact on their mental health. So there is a stark difference between the fun to be had in the bedroom and the celebration of that, which can quite, if people want to put it on the internet, good luck to them, that's fine by me. And what we're really talking about here, which is illegal and needs to be closed down because of the huge impact it's having on the lives of people in Britain.
Just sticking with the pornography review for a little bit longer, and then I'd love us to talk about the Online Safety Act as well. So these recommendations, 32, are there any challenges or indeed opportunities that you foresee in implementing those, or even government, because it's just a recommendation at this stage, isn't it? It's yet to be decided whether they're taken up or not. What do you see are those opportunities and challenges being implemented?
Ian, the hard work's just begun.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Baroness Burton has done a terrific job of putting out a menu of 32 things, but we now need to take them over the line, and it's going to take, typically for low salient, high contention issues like this that have very, very little political dividend for our ministers, but which are legally tricky and have huge pushback from the tech industry and are in a confusing world of adult content. I mean, this is going to be hard. These are going to be hard yards getting them over the line. But a coalition has formed that do see the dangers of nasty, vicious, violent, criminal adult content and are very keen to see something happen.
One of the recommendations that I wanted to ask you about, particularly as someone who's so involved in health and public health, is one that just recommends that the government should do further consultation and research on whether problematic porn use should be recognised as an addiction. What are your thoughts around porn use? Problematic porn use is a language the report uses, being addictive, and do you think there is room for more research around that?
Oh yes, for sure. I mean, it's been a real struggle. People don't like the thought that something that's seemingly passive, like watching porn, is something that's going to drill into your brain and change the chemistry of your mind to such an extent that you become dependent on it. But that is what happens. It's a similar journey that campaigners in the gambling field have been through. A few years ago, I remember when champions of legislation on restrictions on gambling were trying to persuade policymakers that gambling was something that was a trap that many people found difficult to escape from. They couldn't win that argument for ages. But the research has become very emphatic, and I'm now persuaded that gambling is one of the most nasty of all the addictions. It's probably the one that stays with people the longest in their lives. It does make smoking and drinking seem relatively lightweight by comparison. I think that something similar needs to happen with pornography. We need to use research to really understand what the impact on the brain is and what the route out is.
And so you mentioned gambling and gambling harms, and because here in the UK it has been recognised as a public health concern, the NHS are now able to offer services or refer people to services in a way that certainly doesn't happen with pornography. In fact, in the report, I know it says they sort of searched the NHS to see what services were available around porn and helping those, and there was 0 results. Do you think that would be a good thing, that the NHS plays a part in offering support and services, or when it comes to pornography harms?
No, I think there's a real dilemma there. I mean, I think that the number one priority is to protect children. I think that the starting point has got to be to guard the perimeter, making sure that people who are not of an age to be able to cope with this kind of content are let nowhere near. And that's absolutely the number one priority. When it comes to the treating of people with an addiction, the dilemma is that it costs a fortune. It's really, really hard work, and the recidivism rates are really high. I mean, once you've been tainted with addiction, I have plenty of addiction in my family. I've seen it close hand. It leaves its mark and sometimes doesn't go away. So of course the NHS should step up to its responsibilities and help people on that journey. But we have to be open-eyed about it. It costs a lot of money and it doesn't always work, which then begs the question, how do we ever let people get into that state in the first place? So I am much more interested in trying to stop people getting there than simply scaling the resources to treat. The NHS has plenty on its plate. It's way behind on doing basic tests for big diseases that are completely unavoidable. It really doesn't need to have another socking great big responsibility plopped on its plate. simply because the tech industry are unable to police nasty, vicious, violent, criminal porn, and because gangsters and crooks are too busy making money out of the misery of other people.
I know one of the ways in which the NHS has had some funding is kind of stuff being levied from the gambling industry to bring in some support. Is there a model like that whether it's the NHS or other external sort of support services, do you think that's a route to be kind of in some way taxing or levying those big tech companies to offer support?
No, I think, listen, the idea of trying to using the fiscal system to target harms, I'm interested in. The sugary drinks industry levy brings in about 300 million, and most of that money goes into sports at schools. So that's a nice balance. But ultimately, working with industry hasn't broadly led to reduction in harms. Actually, if anything, it normalizes and builds into the system the harms in the first place. So in terms of the amount of sugar that we eat as a country, we eat twice the amount of sugar than the CMO would recommend. Have we seen a reduction in the total amount of sugar being eaten in Britain? No, we haven't. So actually that tax, although it's kind of neat, all it does is harden up the poor situation we're in at the moment. Having a tech levy or a porn levy to pay for some of this is a not bad way of trying to get the externalities to pay the health bill. But I don't want to see thousands and thousands of people suffering from porn addiction for the rest of their lives just because we're made to feel good about it because there's a subsidy for the NHS. I want to go upstream and stop the harm from happening in the first place.
So let's talk a little bit more about upstream then. So you've also been involved in the Online Safety Act, and that is very much looking at some of those kind of upstream issues. Tell us a little bit about what the Online Safety Act is trying to achieve in terms of holding companies to account, for example.
Listen, it's a really tough area to be policing. When we started on the Online Safety Act, the AI boom hadn't really begun. We thought we were 10 years off the AI boom, and suddenly it blew up out of nowhere. I was involved in the 2003 Communications Act, 22 years ago, and I remember when we did that, we were like, and we must do another act within 5 years, otherwise, we won't have caught up. 22 years later, and we said the same, we got to try to somehow keep up with the change in technology. It's really, really difficult. But this has been a well-intentioned effort. My concern about it is that it was old-fashioned in as much as it really talked about the content. And when it said content, I think it really means the harms from extremism, from pornography, from hate, from the kinds of visual and verbal and written material that can cause harms. That's fine and very difficult to police. And certainly the tech industry has grown fed up with running its own kind of moderating channels, as we've seen, as Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have made really plain to us. But it doesn't address the heart of these problems, which is the algorithm itself. And if you have at the center of these social media businesses in particular, but also the pornography businesses, gambling businesses, and all the other industries that are jacked to appeal to our worst and weakest emotions, then we're going to be seeing billions of pounds of engineering and marketing dollars spent on drilling into our brains without sufficient restraint. And our Neanderthal brains just aren't suited to coping with that. This is not a question of freedom of speech or privacy or expression. It's about figuring out how to moderate the brilliance of technology so that it doesn't harm the humans in our society. What was the failure of the Act? It was to fail to address that problem. Is that possible? Well, I wish we had tried harder, but it is a very difficult thing to do.
What do you think could influence success then for the Act? at this stage for what as it stands?
Well, I think agility. Listen, there was lots of flexibility built into the Act. It was deliberately designed in order to give regulators and police forces powers in a flexible way so that they can adjust to new circumstances. For goodness sake, I hope they take up that flexibility and they don't become caught up in the mindset of sort of judicial reviews and risk aversion and fear of stepping out of the legislative guidelines. You see, it is really tough when you're a minister or an official or a regulator that you rely a lot on precedent. But if the technology and the circumstances have changed, you can no longer rely on the past. You have to stick your neck out and say, well, we're going to use the principles of the past to apply to this new circumstance. That courage and that ambition is what I'm hoping very much that we'll see from the government and the regulators and the police forces.
So the Act certainly touches on issues like pornography, but it goes broader, as you've said, and also in terms of content, but also in terms of platforms. So it talks a lot about social media platforms, for example. I know that the Children's Commissioner report around how young people are exposed to pornography was talking about how Twitter or X is actually one of the main places that young children were exposed to pornography first. And I know you've spoken a little bit about the importance of preventing that happening, protecting young people, particularly on mainstream platforms like Twitter. Parents aren't necessarily imagining that that's where their young people are going to be exposed. What do you think social media companies can be doing differently to protect young people and children in particular?
Well, I've been on a bit of a journey on this one, and I have definitely come around to thinking that we shouldn't have under 16-year-olds on social media broadly. And 5 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have been there, even 2 years ago. But the more that I've understood the damage that's being done to our children's lives at every level, to their mental health, to the way in which they interact with each other, the way in which they're learning, the way in which they are no longer spending time outside or taking risks in their childhood. I've come to realise that this really is breaking the fundamentals of this sort of childhood experience. I've got 4 kids. They're all in good shape and pretty active, but I regret every hour they have spent on Instagram, Snapchat, and all that other junk. And I am as active a parent as you could possibly imagine in terms of policing this stuff. I am completely hard over, and yet when I look at my children's screen time, it's still way too much. So yes, we can try to police the algorithm, but it is really difficult to say to someone that we want to be involved in the core of your business. It is much easier to police the perimeter. And I think that a lot of these technologies, we're going to have to be laid back about their impact on adults, and we have to accept that grown-ups need to make their own choices. And that's frankly a fundamental part of my political beliefs, that grown-ups should be allowed to make their own choices. Children, forget it. And so I'm strongly supportive of keeping under 16-year-olds off social media all the time. Very interested in what they're doing in Australia and elsewhere.
Have you had any conversations with those companies or some of your colleagues? I mean, is there a resistance to raise it from 13, which I guess is the standard, to 16, for example?
Yeah, totally. I mean, no, it's politically really tricky. I mean, 89% of 12-year-olds have a smartphone, so they have free access. That is completely ungovernable by parents. Parents value enormously the ability to stay in touch with their children. I've spoken to 2 of my children on phones already today. I wanted to check, one had got to school, and I needed to check sports arrangements with another one. So that, phones and families are definitely unstoppably intertwined. It's the smart bit of the smartphone problem that is the issue for me. there's not an easy technological challenge. Giving your phone giving your kids Nokia bricks is a restriction. It means they don't have access to their wallet or to a map or to their contacts or to a camera. But we need to figure this stuff out. And so it really is the predatory nature of people who can find your child on a phone. It is the algorithm that drills into their brain. It is the content that they come across, such as the pornography, the violence, the extremism. And it is the sheer quantity of time that they spend on their phones. Those are the four things that I think are problematic. And we really need to reboot this. And in future generations, they'll look back on this like smoking on the underground.
Part of the Online Safety Act touches on age verification.
Yes.
And again, in the same way we would have with gambling, if you're under 18, it's a lot more difficult to access online gambling sites. We don't have quite the same currently ability to restrict or enable protection for young people under 18 on porn sites. What are your thoughts about that in terms of that being implemented and regulated now that it's in an act? And secondly, why do you think there's been so much resistance towards it? You would think that would be a bit of an obvious one that shouldn't get pushback, but it has had that.
So if I can answer the second one first. So I think one of the big pushbacks is people didn't have confidence that it was possible. That we've been sold this lie for ages, for 30 years essentially. Sex.com was registered in 1996. I remember those days really well. I was working at the Ministry of Sound. We put cameras in our nightclub in 1997. It was hugely good fun. And the lie that was sold is you can't regulate the internet. There are servers all over the world. They're just going to put their servers in Vanuatu. And if people want to find it, they can. And they'll just use a VPN. So that kind of nihilism, that legal nihilism, has been the most difficult thing to fight. And it's been rubbish for a long time. The technologies that tech companies have available to themselves have meant that they can serve adverts, they can restrict the playing of music, they know thousands and thousands of things about all of us. When these brilliant minds put their imaginations and ambition to a task, it's phenomenal what they can achieve. So the idea that they can't put age restriction on pornography has been a joke. And I deeply regret the fact that rich, responsible tech owners haven't done more to play their role in answering this call. I think there's also been a political confusion. You asked about the difference between good people having fun in the bedroom versus nasty illegal porn. I think that is been a confusing area for a lot of people. People see pornography as part of a sort of sexual liberation, and they've got a point on that. They see some of the performers as having some kind of feminist role, or maybe being champions of a sense of expression or a sense of freedom that it should be supported rather than in any way admonished. And maybe they have a point in some isolated cases. But this argument that the porn industry is basically run by rapists and crooks, and the performers are to the vast majority victims who deeply regret, and the power structure is all the wrong way around. That has been a very challenging argument to win.
So James, you've said that politically this is nuanced, it's complicated, it's certainly maybe there's not a lot of obvious political gain for people because there's not a lot of dividend politically, I think that's how you put it. So why have you stepped into this area of trying to talk about the harms of pornography, beginning to bring that into Westminster and the wider public attention?
Well, my broad interest is in prevention, is in trying to figure out how can we take steps today to stop physical and mental illness tomorrow, which is itself really tricky territory. It's not really how we run the country, but it's time we woke up to the need for it. But I stumbled into the porn debate almost by accident, really. When Neil Parish, the Tractor MP, was in the headlines, and
just to say, because not everyone will necessarily be familiar with that story because maybe they're not from the UK. So Neil Parish was an MP.
Neil Parish was an MP who got outed for, amongst other things, watching porn movies in the chamber of the House of Commons. Mm-hmm. And my goodness, when the outrage people felt about that was incandescent and quite reasonably. But I had a slightly different response, partly because of something that had happened to me around that time, which is I was taking the tube, at 8 o'clock in the morning with children and, mums and dads in the morning. And the guy sitting next to me was watching at considerable volume a porn movie at breakfast time. And so I had one of these absolutely awful Englishy kind of interventions where, I was like, mate, you can't do that. And he was like, mate, leave me alone. And anyway, he did stop watching the porn movie, but it was quite a sort of memorable moment. And I thought to myself, goodness, he must be really, really stuck into a high level of addiction, that he's lost all of his social norms, that he for a moment thinks that watching porn movies at breakfast time on the tube is in any way a good idea. And that's how I felt about Neil Parish. So I spoke about this publicly and on the radio, and it woke me up to this huge explosion we had during the pandemic of the vast amounts of pornography that had been consumed, more than the BBC, and also the need for change and the opportunity that the Online Safety Act presented us.
And so I know that you said earlier that your family have had some experience of addiction. Do you think having that experience has helped you view porn use in a slightly different way then?
Yeah, I think I've seen people I love be completely trapped. Good, kind, reasonable, thoughtful, loving people trapped by the monster of addiction. And in doing so, doing things and harming people in ways and harming themselves that wouldn't have been normal or you'd have expected from them. And also wrestling with trying to shake it off. My goodness, how tough. And in my mother's case, she became addicted to alcohol, and you could see her dying in front of you. And when I was 10 years old, she died. And so the consequences of this kind of addiction, they can be lethal. It really can.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about, alcohol, for example, and we've talked a little bit about nicotine, for example, as well as kind of people who profit through selling something that is widely recognized as being addictive, and it still continues. And big alcohol, big nicotine, had back certainly in the past, and perhaps still presently, whole lobbying kind of things to sort of come against some of the scientific research. I remember reading about scientific research being done around whether nicotine was harmful or not. And that there was just this huge thing from kind of nicotine companies trying to bring out research to sort of back them up. Are we seeing anything like that when it comes to pornography? There is peer-reviewed research looking at things like how porn is, harmful to the brain, and you've talked a little about that today. Is there another side to that coin? Is there, a lobbying from big porn? Is there sort of like research being done in that way as well?
Yes and no. It is slightly different. So the tobacco industries are huge, whereas even Pornhub, it's not that big of a business really, and it doesn't have the same representation. It doesn't support a big agricultural community and so on and so forth. But what it does do very thoughtfully is that it makes arguments that the rest of the tech industry are keen to pick up. Now, what I don't know is how much of the tech industry is really willing and determined to defend pornography because of the amount of secondary income it makes. So we know that porn accounts for a huge amount of internet consumption. They say around 20%, 25%. Well, if you're a business that relies on page views for your income, like a Facebook, then if you saw a 20% reduction in the amount of page views, my goodness, that's going to hit your share price in a big way. Or even if you're providing the algorithmic backbone of some of these players, if you saw reductions in the amount of internet traffic, that's something you're going to fight to defend. And I think that there has been a willingness and a willfulness amongst many in the tech community to, at best, ignore some of these arguments and to talk them down, and at worst to really try to defend the quantity of pornography that's being consumed. In addition to which, the porn companies themselves, they do have a reach into government, and at the moment we see OnlyFans being held up as somehow a champion of ethical adult content. I don't buy it, really. It's not possible to know what goes on through the pages of OnlyFans because it's behind a subscription wall and they are completely untransparent, a fact that immediately raises my hackles and alarm bells. But also, everything that we know about the porn industry and its practices, whilst there are some people who are making money for themselves and have agency in their own lives, the vast majority are either under circumstances of coercion or some kind of massive power imbalance. And listen, I'm a businessman, I'm a capitalist, I don't mind a bit of power imbalance. I don't think that the whole world has got to be kumbaya and fluffy marshmallows. But we're talking about acute power imbalances where victims are pushed around and made to do things that they don't want to do and will regret for the rest of their lives and maybe have long-term mental and physical consequences. So that's what the porn industry looks like to me. And so when I hear businesses like OnlyFans trying to make the case for ethical adult content and purporting to be great British tech success stories, and when I see regulators being supporters of that kind of content and actually going out of their way to run some kind of industrial strategy around the adult content, I just bristle and wonder what the hell these people are thinking, and I just want to give them a massive wake-up call.
I mean, yeah, OnlyFans is a UK company. Pornhub isn't. And I guess a lot of the other kind of adult content providers wouldn't be UK companies. What are your thoughts around that, particularly when we think about legislation? We've talked about two kind of UK laws, or we've talked about, you know, a review and then a UK Act in the Online Safety Act, which I think the UK wants to be, and has said it wants to be ahead of the game on some of this stuff and be passing laws quickly, and actually is, I think. How does this work internationally? What can we do about the fact these companies are based all over the world or can change their HQs and they can move around? Obviously, we even see that with people like Amazon, you know, and tax stuff. You know, there's a lot going on here as businesses. That these are international businesses with clients all around the world. What can happen in terms of legislation when you're dealing with that?
I'd say two things about that. Firstly, there's a lot more that one country can do than a lot of people would give you credit for. I can tell you, if you go to many countries, if you go to Dubai, you go to Malaysia, I mean, let alone even China. There's not much porn in China, I can tell you. There are whole chunks of the world where they have a completely different approach to the internet. And the idea that it all has to be free and open and there's no restraint for anything is a peculiarly Western approach. And it's been a fascinating experiment for 25 years, 30 years. I really think we're at the end of this experiment. And the kids are the ones who are paying the biggest price, but it's having a really big impact right across society. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating huge blanket restrictions, but the idea that criminal content, stuff that breaks the law of the land in the UK, is freely available on the internet because it's just too hard to regulate the British internet, I just don't buy anymore. That said, to make a really big impact, we will need international collaboration. What happens in Europe, what happens in America is really meaningful. You can see the impact of the Australian efforts to try to get kids off social media. It has echoes around the world. And ultimately what happens, a lot of these decisions are made in California. So when we're talking about not so much the porn industry, but those players who support the porn industry in the tech industry, those decisions are made in Texas and in California. So we need American courts, American legislators, American states to step up to the challenge. The last few months have been a massive setback in that. But, sometimes you do have to go backwards a bit before you go forwards. It's interesting what happened in Brazil when Elon Musk found his social media company challenged in the courts. He thought he could step into Brazil, and he came off worse in that argument. And I think that the public mood has really, really changed. Look what kind of reception Andrew Tate is getting in America. Can you really tell me that Andrew Tate is going to be walking the streets of America in a year's time? I think that people are pretty horrified by the attitudes of the White House and of people like Elon Musk. This anything goes approach is not what we expected from our governments, and I just don't think it's going to last.
I mean, interestingly, I think in the States, and obviously it's a unique thing there, obviously, in that you have federal and state laws being passed, but various states seem to be making progress in around recognising pornography as a public health issue, for example, which is something we're still trying to do here. So it is, it's common. And then you do have Elon Musk and some of the things that are happening there. But yes, I mean, it's I think for me, my question is what would that sort of coalition of countries look like in around an issue like this? Is it going to happen from the ground up? Is it going to be movements of individuals and families, or can it come from kind of government level as well?
Well, I think that the tobacco example is both a warning and an inspiration. It is a warning because tiny incremental improvements each year are a total disaster. 1954 was when we first had empirical evidence that smoking killed you. And in the UK, we've still got 13% of people in the UK smoking. Amongst the lowest socioeconomic demographics, it's 25%. So that's a total disaster. That's been a public health humiliation that we've allowed lethal smoking to run for 70 years. And so we have to be very careful that we don't fall into the trap of working with industry and a little bit of improvement each year so that the politicians have a press release and industry crying like mad, but actually being imaginative and creative and finding new ways to sell their product. So that's the warning. But I think that will there be a moment when there's some kind of international UN declaration on adult content, illegal adult content? I think that's unlikely. I think we do need to be looking at state legislatures and Australians and Ofcom and the individual efforts of right-thinking legislators and regulators and civic society to make an impact. And that's why the work of people like you, Ian, is really, really important.
How do you see it happening in Westminster then? You're a voice that's talking about this issue and you're putting your neck out a little bit perhaps because of that. How seriously do you think other parliamentarians are taking this topic of the harms of pornography? Issues like trying to regulate online what's illegal offline, so those things that you've talked about today. And is this issue divided on party political lines, or is there a cross-party consensus? What are you seeing in Westminster?
Well, I'm very grateful for the support I've had from all four corners of the House of Lords. it isn't divided in party lines. It is divided a little bit in sentiment lines. Those people who find issues around community and society uncomfortable do back off this issue very, very quickly. But you find people who care about family, society, and understand the consequences of this kind of harm. I pay tribute to the Centre for Social Justice, who've done a huge amount of work here on the right. I pay tribute to MPs like Jess Asato, Jess Phillips, Alex Davis-Jones in the Labour benches, who are real champions for this cause. So I think you find people in all parts of Parliament. The fact that we're seeing more powerful, thoughtful, modern women is helpful. I've named 3 of them. That generation of women who don't think that the emancipation of women includes them, or are aware that the emancipation of women can lead to women becoming victims, are conscious of the potential for harm there, I think is really, really helpful. And I think that the social contract between government and tech is evolving. Now, with AI, tech seems to have the whip hand. It's the vibe is that we should let them crack on and do whatever it takes so that our tech beats the Chinese tech. And tech definitely thinks it has a carte blanche just at the moment. That's not a partnership. That is a relationship open to abuse. So I'm looking for a maturing and an evolution of that. And I pay tribute to Britain for leading on this. The AI summit at Bletchley Park did put safety at the top of the agenda. And it did it not because it wanted to hold back or harness or disable the potential of AI. It was in order to give it guardrail so it can fly as high as it can.
And you've talked about and some of you've used language like gangsters and rapists being, the people who are creating content, not necessarily the platform tech giants, but the people who then use that as a vehicle to profiteer off people and the lives of people. I think, is there, again, you feel like that's an easy thing for people to identify and say, they're obviously villains and we should do something about that. Is it harder to see people who are just making money by turning a blind eye to that? Those tech giants?
No, I think both things are difficult. Listen, this Andrew Tate phenomenon is incredible. He's on charges for rape in Romania. And he is presenting himself as a champion for free speech and trying to champion a sort of sense of male identity and plug into a yearning, an understandable yearning amongst many men for meaning in the 21st century. Yeah. And he's putting himself as the champion for that kind of sentiment. In other words, he's deliberately stirring up a whole confusing mess of perfectly reasonable emotions in order to disguise this horrible money-making machine that abuses women. So no, I think it's tough. I think that these are some very smart people who are deliberately throwing chaff in our faces, and we have to be smarter and tougher in order to pin them down.
So if there was one piece of legislation that you could pass tomorrow that hasn't been passed as yet around this whole topic, what would it look like? What would it be?
Yeah, I think it is hardening up the consent legislation. It is really difficult to, that's the fundamental. Because for me, this isn't about a moral attack on people's sexual proclivities. I'm fine with people getting up to all sorts of stuff in their room with whoever they fancy. I really am. It's the power imbalance that I am object to. It is the breaking of the law, and it is really difficult when you are faced with situations of coercive control to ask the victim to prosecute the criminal. You're putting the victim into a very awkward. So what we need is a basic threshold of consent that everybody can, that is very transparent, and that everyone subscribes to, and that will go some way. It will still be abused, but I think it will go a long way to making this industry much more transparent and to restore some kind of balance.
And so a final question would be, if you could imagine society in, say, 10 years, you've already talked about how rapidly change is happening in the tech world, for example, and some of the laws you were involved with, thinking, 10 years ago, what it would look like now, and getting that wrong in terms of how quickly things happened. Where would you like society to be on this issue in 10 years?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, I hope we can work towards a time when people aren't buying sex, full stop. When I was a kid, the idea that adults would sometimes seek sexual gratification with children, people shrugged their shoulders and shook it off. They didn't really think about it. They just put it down to that was one of the things that happened in the world, and didn't think it had long-term effects. At Harrow, where I was at school, at my prep school, there were terrible teachers, and everyone knew about it. And in the Christian community I was a member of, which has been very, very publicly broken up. And people just thought it was okay, even made excuses for it. Even the victims shook it off. And we've had a massive rethink. And I would aspire that there is no one who is a child is put in that situation again. My personal instincts are the same with the buying of sex. I'm not in any way trying to take a huge moral position on this, but I can't help thinking that in years to come, we will look back at the idea of buying sex or buying pornography in the same way that we think of child abuse.
James, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom, and for really helping us think about this really complicated but such an important part of this issue. So
no, but seriously, Ian, thank you for the hard work that you put in and to Naked Truth. You're addressing one of society's most knotty problems. It's not easy, but we're very grateful for the work that you do.
Thanks.